I'm Nat Welch. I'm co-chair of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee for the town of Concord. I'd like to welcome you today to the Junction Park site walk. I'd like to introduce the committee members. Richard Vollander is our co-chair, and if you have not signed in with him, could you please sign in? Adrian Boardman, Deb Adelman, Dorcas Miller, there we are. John, I don't know if John is here. John Soden's not. But we have 3 new members just appointed by the Select Board: Sam Stearns, Tracy Hansen, and Mary Beth Barker, who has been appointed from the Committee on Disabilities. I'd like to welcome them as appointed but not yet sworn in new members. The Select Board asked us last month to take a look at Junction Park. There have been a lot of concerns and questions about safety in the park and the mix of riders and walkers, skateboarders, and damn it if someone isn't riding through the park right now. That's very ironic. And they asked us to do a conceptual redesign for a permanent long-term solution for the park. And what we're doing today is we're going to take a walk around the park, get a sense of the lay of the land, the various components of the park, the approaches to it, and then come back here afterwards and have a questions and observations time. We are going to follow that up with some additional formal meetings of the committee to take public comments, to think about what we've learned, what possible solutions are, and what we need to do in terms of creating a report to the Select Board. Again, it's a conceptual redesign, and the purpose is safety. That's the overriding concern. And how do we create a separation of riders from walkers, potentially, as a way of going about it? Our report is due to the committee. Our recommendations are due to the Select Board on the 30th of June. So we'll, in this walk around, we'll get a sense of the parcels, its surroundings. I'd like you to think about challenges, come up with observations as we walk around, think about questions that you have that we may want to consider. It's important to remember 2 things. We're not talking about solutions today yet. So if anybody says, well, what if I'm going to ask you to hold those comments. The second thing is that there's a lot of history in this park, and we are tasked with looking forward, not with looking backward at what happened. So I'd like us to be very forward thinking in terms of what we do from this point forward. This is an active railroad track. We're going to be crossing that. We're also going to be crossing the street over there. I'd like to ask everyone to be thoughtful and careful as you do that. There is no signal crossing the track, so we want to look both ways. As I said, at the end of this, we'll take questions, observations, comments. I would like to point out that key materials are on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee website. And you should take a look at those over the next week or two to familiarize yourself with the history and the information related to how this came about, so we can think about where we go. I'd like to introduce also Marcia Rasmussen. I should have done it earlier. Marcia is Director of Land Use and Planning.
Planning and Land Management.
Damn, Planning and Land Management. Marcia also has a construction map, a plan of construction for this area, so we can use it to review. And I believe there's some other members of the town staff here.
Hi, Alan Cathcart, Director of Public Works.
Alan Cathcart, Director of Public Works.
Steve Different, Town Engineer.
Town Engineer.
Aaron McCloskey, Highway and Ground Superintendent.
Highway. Anybody else?
And Aaron Stevens.
Aaron Stevens,
Public Information and Communications.
Aaron Stevens, Public. Okay, great. Thank you, Aaron, and the rest of the town for being here. They're an integral part of our work, helping us understand what we have and where we're going. Further meetings will, as I said, we'll talk about potential solutions and what the recommendations are. One thing to point out is we don't have funding to hire experts. That's not our job. Our job is a conceptual redesign, to give ideas to the town, to help them understand what the challenges, constraints, options are, and do that by June 30th. Are there any questions related to the site walk that I can answer? Where we're standing are actually two plots of land. The Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee has been charged by the Select Board with a piece of the property, which you can see on the map, one of the parcels upon which is the railroad right-of-way upon which the rail trail runs. Anything to add to that?
Well, just today we have staked out approximately the property lines, the corners of the park itself, as well as the property line defining the state land from the town land. So we can point those out as we walk through the site. But you can see there the hot pink stake there. That's the midpoint between the two properties. Where most of you are standing is state land. Where Nat and Richard and I are standing is town land. So there are. We may need to have people stationed if we want to do sight lines at the endpoints, because the endpoint is behind the trees over here, and then there'll be a markup by the curb for that midline as well as the corners.
Marcia, how wide is the state land?
Well, that was a question, and Joseph Cormier, who was out here providing that survey information. He was going to measure it, but I wasn't here when he did. It's either 50 or 60 feet. For the state land, the town land is 30 feet wide.
Marcia, did you say that pink thing is the midline or the edge?
That is a midpoint on a property line that runs down the middle of the park.
Of the
Right.
state's property.
Right. So
Well, that's the defining. It defines the point between town of Concord land and state land.
So it's running from the street to the railroad track, and that's at the middle of the line that runs between the two.
So would you say it's, if we're facing that pink marker, to the left is X and something is to the right?
So if we're standing at the marker, to the right is the right-of-way, the state land upon which the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail runs. On the left is the town land.
And is there another pink one?
There will be pink. Yeah, there's a pink marker. I'll go stand at the other one.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it's a straight line.
It's a straight line.
Straight line.
See the further pink way down, I can see it.
Yep. And the map here, you can get a sense of that.
You'll be able. If you look at the map, you can see that there's a straight line right through the park.
So what we're going to do is we're going to first walk across the tracks and then take a left. We walk down to where the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is. We're going to walk up as if we're walking the trail or riding it, but you should be thinking you're walking when you get close to here. We're going to come around, and then we're going to walk across Main Street to the other side so you can get a sense of both the angles and what it looks like with people coming in. Then we're going to come back here, and we're going to do observations, thoughts, questions. I will have no answers, but I will gladly take all your questions.
Is there somebody who's taking notes today or recording?
Richard's taking notes. This is being taped by Minuteman Network, which we
as we go
think.
around, you should try to think of yourself as both a park user and then as a trail user.
Right.
And how does a trail user view this, and how would a park user
Right.
view this?
Okay. Yes.
Does the trail go across state and town land, or
The question is, does the trail cross both state land and when you say parkland, I assume you mean Junction Park, the town land here? No, the rail trail runs along the state land. However, from here, it jogs around across an easement across MBTA land and the people who own Woods Hill Table. And then it cuts across a railroad track and then reconnects with state land down here. That's all on the map. Yes.
As we're thinking about this parcel, should we ignore the state land piece of it, or would you say that the state land is within the scope of us imagining?
That's a great question. So the question is, as we think about this question, we should think about both pieces of land, right? Both parcels. The select board was Junction Park, figure out how to make it safer. The Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is part of that. And I think they want a holistic solution that thinks about using both parcels to solve the problem.
And I have a number.
You have a number?
It's 50 feet wide.
50, okay. The right-of-way is 50 feet wide.
That makes sense, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, we're not going to be able to cross right now.
Right. That's the bell. Okay, so I think we're done with this introductory part. Thank you. So the first thing to point out is that the right-of-way continues along here to where that white truck is, and that picks up the trail. So people who are riding, they will see this parking lot. The trail itself curves around to the right as the rider approaches it, and you can see it raised, and it comes in over here. We're going to walk over there. So one of the first challenges is keeping riders on the trail coming over to here. Okay.
Nat, what I would like to just, one of the things that the advisory committee has been talking about, we got a grant a year ago for some bike racks and shelters. These 4 or 5 spaces here will be eliminated as car parking, and the bike racks will be going in this location, hopefully by the end of December. I've got to check with Public Works and see how things are going. But that's when I've talked about the bike racks to the advisory committee. This is where they'll go.
And is there a shelter? And they'll be inside the shelter?
They will not be inside. The shelter will just be an overhead.
Overhead.
Just to provide a little bit of shade and a little bit of rain protection.
And snow protection in December. Right. So, I'm sorry.
No, that was all I wanted to point out. Thank you.
So, walkers and riders come from here. There's one sign, cyclists dismount, bike and walk on path. We have another sign on the pavement. These signs aren't working, and that's one of the reasons why we're having this site walk. So they'll approach here, they'll cross over, and we'll do the same thing. A gate was installed for the railroad crossing here. When the trail was built, which was 2017, is that right?
2018.
2018. And that's it from this perspective. There's also a nice sign about West Concord, and it's the meaning of this area in terms of the station.
But we're going to walk where the bikers go.
Yes, we're going to walk where the we're going to walk where the walkers go too. So we'll do both.
Trail users here.
Trail users here.
And you're back. See, you were late.
Then we're going to cross. So this land, this part of the trail is an easement. And what I want you to observe as we walk around is, at this point, bikers should be walking, dismounted, and we'll come around the corner and think about the sight lines as this path comes into Junction Park. Junction Park begins on the other side of the cafe, and you'll see where it joins. At that point, we're going to take a right, and we're going to walk over to Main Street. Okay. The trail comes back into Junction Park. A good chunk of the state land, the Green Thumbs have built a beautiful garden set of plantings here. There is a water retention area here, but this is where you will run into people in the park and people coming along the trail. This is where they join. So this is one of the interesting areas that we're going to have to think about in terms of that.
So we're right here.
So yes, you're right there. And this granite delineates the edge of the state land, and it runs straight to Main Street. And, yes.
The depot is in town.
The depot is also on MBTA land, but it is a separate parcel because it was sold for private purposes, and then the MBTA was convinced to take it back in the 1990s. So that was...
So they're renting from the MBTA?
The Club Car Cafe is renting, is a
Okay.
lessee of the MBTA.
And I understand that the parking lot here is owned by Woods Hill Table.
No.
The parking lot here is on MBTA
It's
land.
actually on both properties.
Both, okay,
So
sorry.
they share that access entrance into the area. And the parking that's against Woods Hill Table belongs to Woods Hill Table. The parking that's adjacent to the park belongs to the MBTA and
Right.
is used by Club Car Cafe.
Right,
But
right.
actually, Marcia, may I ask, it seems to me that Bristol Table land goes partly into that they own because it extends where the people parking over there. But their property jog is a jog on their property.
Yes. You can see that here.
I know where it's going to show.
Okay.
It's not all owned by a
That's what I just said.
Yeah.
That their property line is.
We're looking at the property line.
No, that's an easement. That's the easement.
The camera person should get a close-up of the map.
Right, they will.
Property line for
Yep.
Woods Hill Table is here, and it comes back along the back property line and over. There was a piece of land that was also acquired by the Woods Hill Table, and I've got to find that other property line. May have been. There's a lot of lines on this plan.
Where they had their outside seating, that going went up to their property somewhere.
So one of the things maybe that we should do is for our future meeting is just have the property line maps together so we can and colored, yeah, colored.
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
I know this is very problematic, but has anybody ever tried approaching Woods Hill Table for purchasing a strip of land?
They've already given the land that the trail comes over.
Yeah.
They provided a permanent easement over their property for the trail.
Well, I was just thinking
No,
of the parking.
the strip of land is already owned by the MBTA.
MBTA
Yes. Owns that parking
On
area.
this side.
On this side.
On this side.
Yeah, on this
they
side,
own this
yeah.
side.
So it would have to be the MBTA who would,
Right,
Correct,
Give-
which would
I mean,
affect
if-
the parking of their tenant.
yes.
and there's no way they could be approached?
Well, they can be approached. Whether they, what that would mean is that the town would have to give up its commuter parking spaces, and it would depend on their tenant.
Right.
Who is currently leasing the building and using those parking spaces.
So
for their business.
we're not talking about solutions. What we're doing is we have to consider what's in this
What is-
spot. Right.
I understand.
Right,
Thank
right.
you.
Marcia, I just
Okay.
have one more question, and it may be a simple one. And thank you for your materials online. I read most of them. What was the reason, do you recall, that this wasn't designed to go straight as opposed to making the left? Is there just some industrial, maybe some of the other attendees know the answer?
That was proposed
Okay.
back in 2005 by the town manager.
Okay.
The MBTA declined. They said, no, we will not have, if we put the railroad, if we bring additional traffic, if we bring bicyclists across here, we're going to completely redesign this commuter lot, commuter platforms, and eliminate the
crossing.
the pedestrian crossing here.
Okay.
Oh, raise the platform.
They would put in raised platforms and the whole 9 yards. So that was not viewed as the best solution for the commuters who were using that parking lot.
Okay.
They're catching the
Also, I
trains on
think
this side.
that the fact that you don't want kids going through that parking lot. You know, the fact that the rail trail skirts the side of the parking lot to the given crossing is safer for trail users.
Right.
Yes.
And how many of them will actually comply with that?
Because we were able to put in the fencing on either side that they can't go around where the gates come down. You can't do that here because you have the train and you need the access for
Right.
the commuters.
So that's one of the
Differentiation. Yeah.
one of the constraints that we have of many
Yeah.
that we have to think about.
That was a town choice, not to have the MBTA redesign
Right.
the whole.
Right. And I think just to keep in mind, the conceptual redesign can include anything. right? In some sense. I mean, we could say, well, let's build a bridge.
Almost.
You know, from there to there, right? That could be a conceptual redesign, but probably not something that we'll talk about. Marcia has an opinion, right? As the town does too. But this is, you know, with the conceptual redesign, thinking about what flexibility do we have within the space that these two parcels offer us. So let's go to. I'm sorry. Okay. We're going to walk to Main Street. Okay. Excuse me. Yeah, we're going to go to Main Street and then we're going to cross.
You're coming up with solutions.
Right.
I'm not excited.
No, I'm asking, not trying.
Hose storage. Okay, that's hose. We'll go a little bit farther up so everyone can.
I know the pink stake,
Right.
and then how it goes to the other pink stake, which is basically where the fence is,
Right.
right? Basically.
Right. But actually, the town owns up to the road. Right. So people coming from the south, hopefully from Sudbury, not too long from now, and Framingham, will be approaching across the Essex River Bridge, and they'll come to this. This will be one of the first big intersections they'll hit on the trail after 117. And as you can see, we have on the pavement, stop ahead. We have dismount zone. We have bicycle dismount, walk on the path, and then we have a small sign over there to dismount. And again, those aren't getting the job done in terms of that. But so imagine one of our challenges is now thinking, how do we start to create separation and safety as we cross the street here? Keeping in mind that we have to connect up to the continuation of the trail by the cafe, what's the stuff? The Concord Cafe, whatever it's called. The what?
Club Car Cafe.
Club Car.
Yeah.
Gosh, I should have worn my railroad hat. So that's the view from here. Any comments, questions? Okay.
I was just going to say this side is actually blocked by the structure.
Right, when you're coming down. I mean, it's hard to have the sight lines here, so you can see everything. And we've been lucky so far that there have not been accidents inside the park, but this is why we're doing it. Okay, we're going to walk back across. Would you like to lead the way again? The walking piece. I do like the metaphor of the crossing here. This was a really busy area in the 1800s and early 1900s. I think 100 cars a day, 120 trains a day came through this area. So it's kind of metaphorical for the challenge we have of figuring out how to get the wheeled and unwheeled units, through this park. So this is a chance for people to ask questions, to raise observations. I will remind folks that Richard can also take questions afterwards if we just want to give them to us. And if you haven't signed in, please see him. So it's open floor. Comments, questions. Again, we're not doing solutions yet, so keep those in your head.
So one of the things I heard is, what are the parameters for using this space? Can we go beyond the property lines of the town and the state land? So that's something that we should explore.
Right.
I heard a question, I think, about understanding the corners and where the state land was. One of the questions I know I've had is, we know that there are utilities here. There's a major gas supply line that goes underneath here because there's an easement. So where is that? What does that look like? How does that impact anything that we might be proposing? Other observations or questions?
Just the observation I told you, Marcia, that this is a unique rail trail where a rail trail is abutting an actual active railroad, and it would be interesting if in the United States there are any other examples where organizations have dealt with similar challenges.
So just for the TV audience, this is a rail trail that borders or crosses an active rail line, and are there other areas in the U.S. where they've faced these challenges? And I would build on Deb's point, where else have rail trails and pedestrian parks come together, and how have those communities thought through and managed this issue?
One just basic observation, at several points on the tour, particularly when we were across Main Street, we were coming back from that side, and even right here, I found myself just wondering, where's the trail?
Right.
Where do I go? Just orienting towards the directions, and there's so much going on here.
Right. So the observation being that it's not clear exactly where the rail trail runs once you cross Main Street and until you get to the parking lot. That's good.
Yellow bricks, by any chance?
What? Oh.
And to add,
Go ahead, and then you.
yeah, to add on to that, I think what I took away from today is there's two, like, somewhat separate, somewhat combined concerns. One is the pedestrian and bicycle safety within the park itself, and then the other is the safety parameters that come with how and where the trail crosses the railroad. So in my mind, I've been grouping those together as like one solution addresses everything, and I think seeing this in practice today shows that it's two somewhat separate areas that can lead to confusion in Junction Park.
So just to repeat, that one of the questions is around safety and separation of riders and walkers in the park, and then at the boundaries where we cross the railroad tracks, there are safety issues there, and should those be considered as one problem or two parts of one issue? Over here.
About signage, just for the record, can the signs be reconsidered, redesigned, and replaced so that they're at cyclist and pedestrian height?
So the question is, can we reconfigure, replace signs so that they're more effective? Thank you. Other comments?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, we have a lot of signs suggesting that cyclists get off their bikes. What we don't have is a lot of barriers to prevent cyclists from riding their bike to, kind of force them to do that.
Right. So point is, are there ways we can create barriers in the park to slow bikers down or force them to get off their bikes? And I think that's a good point. I will just add that in the select board meeting, that issue was brought up as between now and when we do the permanent solution, is there a temporary solution, plan B to the signs? And that's needs to be part of our deliberations as well. Yes.
I just might add that if you create barriers on the ground, then it becomes a problem for any wheelchair user or people who have walking issues.
Right.
Or adult tricycle users.
Or adult tricycle, right. So the pointing out that if for the interim barrier solutions, which we're not talking about solutions, I know, but we need to consider the constraint of people in wheelchairs or other vehicles like that. Yes, again.
Has there been any consideration of the type of lights that exist elsewhere on the trail that warn motorists to stop?
The flashing lights?
The flashing
You're right. That's not part of this conversation, but the committee has had some conversation about lights at crossings. I know the Friends of the Bruce Freeman have helped other towns or have been involved with other towns getting the automated flashing lights at the crossings. Yeah, again, another, yes.
My other question is whether there has ever been, and maybe this is possible, a joint meeting between the town and the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail and the owners of the disputed land coming over here,
So-
the MBTA and Woods Hill Table.
So
Has there ever been like a joint discussion about how to solve this issue?
So as far as I know, stepping into this, the short answer is no. Has there been any discussion about between the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail and the owners of the other lands. They're not disputed, they're actually owners. And we have not as yet done that. Yes?
At a meeting of the Council on Disabilities, Commission on Disabilities, one of the members suggested that this was referred to it as a design issue. That member's a landscape architect who practices in town.
Right.
I know Marcia had said something about there not being a budget for design services, but is that something that might be considered?
So the question is, would we consider services of a landscape architect? In the scope of this, we have no funds. So I think in some sense that's good because we can be creative and say, here's like an ultimate solution, or here are a set of solutions, and then the people who are experts in the town can then take on the challenge. Yeah.
So I think maybe you're putting the cart before the horse. I think the purpose of having the landscape designer as part of a process
Conceptual.
is to have the landscape designer inform the process as opposed to the process being like herding cats.
I would love to have, I think the committee would love to have a landscape designer volunteer their time to have conversations with us and help us with a conceptual redesign. So that's a great idea. And we'd be happy to have them join us in these meetings.
I want to add one thing. I mean, we've got a June deadline, but there's no reason to think we couldn't do it earlier if we want to. Part of the impetus is that the bridge will be officially open sometime this summer. It'll be probably unofficially open before that, and that will undoubtedly bring a large influx of people to this location. So I think having some sense of urgency about it, I don't think is a bad thing. So yep. Particularly if we can move along over the next few months, maybe we have something to present earlier on, and the select board could get more involved in the details in order to look at that sort of June deadline. Is really not us dragging our feet till then. Is sort of my feeling.
Right. Move with alacrity. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, the question.
Point of signage. Just another thing that hasn't been talked about is the actual ground itself. So along the trail where we're trying to get people to not ride their bikes, there are a lot of different ways that you could paint the ground. I know we're not talking solutions,
right.
But just a question, is that allowed to change that so it's really clear to anybody that they should be walking?
Right. So as part of an interim solution, can we think about ways to use paint or other things on the ground to help riders and users understand what they should be doing in the park? Okay. Yes.
I think just to follow up on that, I think what you need is what's called consistent signifiers. So implicitly, even though I'm not from here, I know immediately, oh, I should be walking here.
Okay.
And in Europe, they're really good at it. Places like Copenhagen, they really got it. And you don't need to speak Danish. I knew where I was supposed to walk. and I think a consistent signifier should be subliminal. Oh my God, I'm seeing this, don't get on my bike phone. And I think it also, what he said is really true. It should be on the ground. Because that's how we hold our head.
Right. So consistency, the observation is
There's no consistent signifier.
There are no consistent signifiers, and we should think about them as we come up with
there could be some cheap, quick ones, because I share your concern about people. Soon enough, we're going to have a lot more people who have never been here, pushing strollers, on bikes, walking, all ages. It's going to be huge, and we're not ready, so we need a consistent, quick signifier.
Okay. Other comments? Yes.
I think people coming from the bridge over Route 2, I think the people coming south across the ridge could be directed more assertively at the end of that parking lot to only go to the right. I mean, I don't know whether it's barriers at the end or something, but I think that's an easier solution than people who are coming north.
So we're not talking solutions, but I think an observation is how do we think about ways to more deliberately shape people's thinking as they approach this area from the north. I think that's good. I think one observation I'd like to make is that uncountless hours and days of effort have gone in by the Concord Green Thumbs to make this place, to kind of develop this piece here. And I think one of our challenges is how can we, if we are going to make changes, how can we work with the Green Thumbs to find ways that we can both increase safety and not detract from, or what are the trade-offs we need to consider with what's here in place versus what we want to have. And I think, for me, I think that's going to be a key part of this, because the Green Thumbs have put a lot of hours and a lot of people are involved in it, and I want to make sure that they're actively involved in our thinking as we think about separation and safety. So that's an observation I've had for a while. Any other, yes?
You mentioned there are no funds. Are you referring to the town funds or Bruce Freeman Rail?
We're an advisory committee, so we have no budget. And in some ways, as I said, I like the fact that we don't have a budget because we can't spend anything. We can ask volunteers to come up with ideas, and we're not limited by a budget, although I know my co-chair and I have from time to time said, well, how big is it going to be? But we don't know yet. So the first thing I think is to think about where are we. Our next, one of our next meetings is to kind of reflect on what we've learned, and I think develop a set of principles for the conceptual redesign. What are the key things that are driving it? What are our considerations? What are our concerns? And then use that as a springboard for our next meeting to potentially start to talk about solutions. And I'd like to thank everybody who's come today to spend the time in this nice, brisk fall day. And we really look forward to having this conversation in the community and getting to a point where we can go to the select board soon, as Richard would like, to give them some ideas about a conceptual redesign. So thank you, everybody. And our next meeting,
December 2nd.
Our next committee meeting is December 2nd. Agenda will be posted, and if any of you want to show up, feel free. Okay, thank you. Thanks, guys.